October 2nd, 1919. The President of the USA, Woodrow Wilson, suffers a massive stroke, leaving him partially paralyzed. His collapse just days earlier on a desperate speaking tour had been a grim foreshadowing. His body, like his dream of a world without war, was broken. How did a man who promised to keep America out of Europe's war end up sacrificing his presidency for a global treaty his own country was poised to reject? During the Progressive Era, America was a nation looking inward, protected by two vast oceans and a deep-seated suspicion of entangling alliances. But its president, Woodrow Wilson, was a man who looked outward. A former professor, austere and unbending, Wilson was driven by an idealistic vision that America had a moral destiny to spread democracy and lead the world into a new era of peace. This was a radical departure from the realist approach that had long prized national interest above all else. And yet his presidency was rife with contradictions. Even as he spoke of self-governance, his administration intervened militarily across Latin America, imposing martial law on Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Then, in August 1914, the great powers of Europe plunged into a war of unimaginable brutality. Wilson appealed for a strict American neutrality, but the Atlantic was not wide enough to keep the war at bay. Economic and emotional ties to the Allies made this difficult, but the defining challenge came from the deep, Germany's new weapon, the U-boat. In May 1915, the British liner Lusitania was sunk, killing nearly 1,200 people, including 128 Americans. The sinking sent a shockwave of horror across the nation, and Wilson issued a stern demand that Germany curtail its submarine warfare. For 2 years, a tense peace held. But in 1917, Germany resumed unrestricted U-boat attacks. This, combined with the public release of the Zimmermann telegram, which proposed a German-Mexican alliance against the US, solidified public opinion. Wilson, the reluctant neutral, now stood before Congress. He asked not for a war of conquest, but for a crusade to make the world safe for democracy. Wilson knew winning the war was only half the battle. The true challenge was winning the peace. Therefore, on January 8th, 1918, he unveiled his blueprint for a new world, the 14 Points. It was a document of breathtaking ambition, calling for an end to secret treaties, absolute freedom of the seas, the removal of economic barriers, and a reduction in national armaments. He demanded the restoration of invaded territories like Belgium, the return of Alsace-Lorraine to France, and championed the principle of national self-determination for the peoples of the Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires. But the final point, the 14th, was the cornerstone of his entire vision. He proposed that a general association of nations must be formed to provide mutual guarantees of political independence and territorial integrity to all states. This League of Nations was to be the world's shield against future wars. When Wilson sailed for the Paris Peace Conference in 1919, he was greeted as a messiah. But inside the Palace of Versailles, his idealistic vision collided with the hardened goals of the Allied leaders. French Premier Georges Clemenceau sought vengeance and security for France above all else, while British Prime Minister David Lloyd George was determined to make Germany pay. The negotiations were a brutal crucible. The resulting Treaty of Versailles was not the just peace Wilson had envisioned. It imposed crippling reparations, and under the infamous Article 231, Germany was forced to accept responsibility for causing the war. Wilson was forced to compromise on nearly all his points to save the one he valued most, the creation of the League of Nations. He had won his prize, but it was embedded in a flawed treaty that sowed the seeds of future conflict. Wilson returned home not to a victory parade, but to the final, most irreconcilably adversarial battle of his life. The fight for the treaty moved to the US Senate, and his chief opponent was the formidable Republican Senator Henry Cabot Lodge. Lodge, a political pragmatist and staunch defender of American sovereignty, focused the opposition on a single paragraph, Article 10 of the League's Charter, which obliged member nations to defend one another from attack. To Wilson, this was the heart of the covenant, the backbone of collective security. To Lodge, it was an unacceptable infringement on American independence that usurped Congress' constitutional power to declare war. Embittered and unwilling to compromise, Wilson decided to take his case directly to the people, embarking on a grueling cross-country speaking tour. The effort exhausted him, and in September 1919 he suffered a debilitating stroke that left him partially paralyzed and secluded. From his sickbed, Wilson made his final, fatal move. He instructed his supporters to vote against any version of the treaty with Lodge's amendments. Twice the treaty went down in defeat. The dream was dead. America, the nation whose leader had conceived of the League, would never become a member. Woodrow Wilson left office a broken man. His legacy is one of profound contradiction. He was the spurned prophet whose vision for collective security would be resurrected a generation later as the United Nations. He offered the world a groundbreaking plan for just peace, but his own uncompromising nature helped ensure his vision would not be realized in his lifetime.